The sun had already bleached the life from everything it touched by the time Isaac Sullivan spotted the heap of blue fabric beside the old Henderson well, and his first thought was that somebody had dumped their laundry until he saw the arm sprawled in the dust. He urged his horse forward, dismounting before the animal had fully stopped, his boots hitting the hard-packed earth with a thud that sent up a small cloud of dust. The woman lay on her side, her dark hair matted with sweat and dirt, her lips cracked and bleeding. Isaac dropped to his knees beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. The pulse was there, faint but steady, and he released a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Easy now," he said, though she could not hear him. He reached for the canteen at his hip, uncorking it with practiced efficiency. Supporting her head with one hand, he brought the canteen to her lips, letting a small trickle of water run across them. She did not stir. He tried again, this time tilting her head back slightly, allowing a bit more water to enter her mouth. Her throat convulsed in an involuntary swallow, and hope surged through his chest. Isaac settled himself in the dirt beside her, his back against the stone base of the dried-up well. The Henderson place had been abandoned for 3 years now, ever since the drought killed their cattle and their will to continue. This land was unforgiving, especially in the summer of 1883, when the heat seemed determined to turn all of North Dakota into a furnace. Bismarck was 5 miles south, too far for someone on foot without water. He continued to give her small sips, watching the sun track across the sky. His mare, Daisy, found a patch of struggling grass and began to graze with half-hearted interest. Time moved differently in the desert spaces between civilization. Minutes stretched like taffy, marked only by the woman's shallow breaths and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. After what must have been an hour, her eyelids fluttered. Isaac leaned forward, bringing the canteen to her lips again. This time her hand moved, weak fingers wrapping around his wrist with the barest pressure. "Take it slow," he said softly. "You're safe now." Her eyes opened fully, revealing irises the color of sage in spring. They were unfocused at first, confused, then suddenly sharp with panic. She tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. A small sound escaped her throat, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Easy there," Isaac said, keeping his voice level and calm. "You have been out in the sun too long. You need to drink more water before you try moving around." She stared at him, studying his face as though trying to determine whether he was real or a mirage. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He helped her drink again, more this time, and color began to seep back into her cheeks, like watercolor spreading across paper. "Who?" she finally managed, her voice like sandpaper on wood. "Who are you?" "Isaac Sullivan. I have a ranch about 3 miles west of here." "Who are you, and what in God's name are you doing out here alone?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she had lost consciousness again. Then she spoke, each word clearly costing her effort. "Catherine Osborne. My wagon. It broke down. Yesterday, I think. Maybe the day before. I cannot remember. Where were you headed?" "Bismarck. My uncle lives there. He runs the general store." She opened her eyes again, looking at him with a desperation that made his chest tighten. "I walked. I thought the well would have water." Isaac glanced at the well behind him, its bucket long since rotted away, the rope hanging limp and frayed. "The Henderson family left years ago. This well dried up before they did." Tears tracked through the dirt on her cheeks, and she turned her face away from him. "I am so stupid. I should have stayed with the wagon." "Hey now," he said, reaching out to touch her shoulder gently. "You made a choice with the information you had. That is not stupid. That is human. Where is your wagon?" She gestured vaguely northeast. "I walked for hours. I do not know anymore." Isaac considered their options. The sun was past its peak, but still brutal. Catherine needed more water, food, and rest before she could travel anywhere. His ranch was closer than Bismarck, and he had medical supplies there. The decision made itself. Can you ride? He asked. She tried to sit up again, and this time he helped her, one arm around her back for support. She swayed like a sapling in high wind, but she stayed upright. I can try. It took time to get her on her feet, more time to get her to the horse. Daisy stood patient as stone, while Isaac boosted Catherine into the saddle, then swung up behind her. Catherine slumped against his chest, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to hold her steady while guiding Daisy with the other. Stay with me, Catherine, he said as they started moving. Talk to me. Tell me about St. Louis. How did you know I am from St. Louis? Your dress, that is city tailoring, and St. Louis is where most folks around here come from when they come from the city. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. My mother had it made for me. She said I needed to look presentable when I arrived in Bismarck. Why did you leave St. Louis? A long pause. The horse's hooves created a steady rhythm against the packed earth, and grasshoppers scattered before them in chaotic clouds. My father died 6 months ago. We had debts, many debts. My mother sold everything to pay them off, then moved in with my sister and her husband. There was no room for me, or that is what they said. My uncle wrote that he needed help with the store, that he would give me room and board and a small wage. It seemed like Providence. I am sorry about your father. Thank you. Her voice was getting stronger, which he took as a good sign. What about you, Isaac Sullivan? How does a man end up ranching alone in the middle of nowhere? Who says I am alone? She tensed against him. Are you not? He smiled, though she could not see it. I am. I was testing whether you had enough spark left to be nosy. This time the laugh was real, though weak. I am always nosy. My mother said it was unbecoming. Out here, nosiness keeps you alive. Folks who do not pay attention to details tend to have short lives. They rode in silence for a while. Catherine's breathing had evened out, and though she still leaned heavily against him, she no longer felt like dead weight. The sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. His ranch appeared in the distance, the small wooden house and barn looking almost like toys from this distance. Is that yours? Catherine asked. That is home, nothing fancy, but it is sturdy and the well is deep. It looks beautiful to me. He urged Daisy into a slightly faster walk, eager to get Catherine out of the sun. As they approached, his dog, a mutt named Rufus, came bounding out to greet them, barking with enthusiasm until Isaac told him to hush. Getting Catherine off the horse proved easier than getting her on, though her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground. Isaac caught her, lifting her into his arms despite her weak protests. I can walk. Maybe tomorrow. Today you let me help. He carried her into the house, which was blessedly cool after the heat outside. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all in one. A door to the left led to his bedroom, another to the right to what had been meant as a guest room, but mostly stored supplies. He took her to his room, laying her carefully on the bed. I will get you some water and food. Do not try to get up. In the kitchen, he filled a pitcher with water from the good well, then assembled a plate of bread, cheese, and dried apples. When he returned, Catherine was struggling to sit up, her face flushed with effort and embarrassment. This is your bed, she said. I cannot take your bed. You can and you will. I will sleep in the other room. It is not a discussion. He set the pitcher and plate on the small table beside the bed. Eat slowly. Your stomach needs to remember what food is before you give it too much. She took a piece of bread, nibbling at it like a mouse. You are very kind. I am practical. You need help, and I can provide it. Nothing kind about that. I disagree, but I am too tired to argue. She took a sip of water, then another piece of bread. Color continued to return to her face, and he could see now that she was probably close to his own age, maybe 25 or 26. Pretty, in a delicate way that seemed at odds with this harsh landscape. Her hands were smooth, uncalloused. the hands of someone who had never done hard labor. "How old are you?" he asked, then immediately felt foolish for asking. 24. You? 27. She studied him with those sage green eyes. You look older. This land ages a man. Were you born here? Isaac shook his head. Pennsylvania. My father was a coal miner. I came west when I was 19, worked on other people's ranches until I saved enough to buy this place 3 years ago. Do you have family back east? 2 brothers, 1 sister, both parents. We write sometimes. He realized he was standing there like a fool, watching her eat. I should tend to Daisy and the other animals. Will you be all right alone for a bit? I will be fine, thank you, Isaac. Outside, he unsaddled Daisy and brushed her down, giving her extra oats for her patience. The chickens needed feeding, the pigs were complaining about their dinner being late, and the 2 milk cows looked at him with bovine reproach. He moved through the familiar chores, but his mind kept returning to the woman in his bed. Catherine Osborne. She had an uncle in Bismarck, which meant she could not stay here. As soon as she was strong enough to travel, he would need to take her to town. The thought created an unexpected hollow feeling in his chest, which he firmly told himself was ridiculous. He had known her for all of 3 hours. When he returned to the house, twilight had settled over the land, and the temperature had dropped to something almost comfortable. Catherine was asleep, the empty plate beside the bed testament to her appetite returning. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, then quietly closed the door and went to prepare his own dinner. That night, he lay on the narrow cot in the storage room, listening to the house settle around him. His thoughts drifted between practical concerns and something less easily defined. Tomorrow he would need to ride out to find her wagon, see if any of her belongings could be salvaged. He would also need to get word to her uncle that she was safe. These were simple tasks, straightforward problems with straightforward solutions. What was not straightforward was the way his heart had jumped when she smiled at him. What was not simple was the realization that his house had felt more alive with her in it than it had in all the time he had lived there alone. He turned over on the cot, punching the thin pillow into a more comfortable shape, and told himself he was being foolish. Catherine Osborne was a woman who needed help, nothing more. He had provided that help because it was the right thing to do. In a few days, she would be in Bismarck with her uncle, and his life would return to normal. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it kept him awake long into the night. Morning arrived with a rooster's crow and sunlight streaming through the small window. Isaac rose, dressed, and started coffee before checking on Catherine. She was awake, sitting up in bed, with considerably more color in her face than she had possessed the day before. "How are you feeling?" he asked from the doorway. "Much better. Embarrassed, but better." She gestured at the dress she still wore, now thoroughly wrinkled and stained. "I must look terrible. You look like someone who survived something most folks would not have. That is nothing to be embarrassed about." He paused, considering. "I do not have women's clothing, but I have a clean shirt that might work as a nightdress, and I can wash your dress if you like." "That would be wonderful, thank you." He brought her the shirt, then discreetly left while she changed. Over breakfast, simple fare of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread, they talked. Catherine told him about her life in St. Louis, her father's bookkeeping business that had failed, her mother's despair, her sister's cold calculation in deciding who could live in her house and who could not. "I am not bitter," Catherine said, though her eyes suggested otherwise. "Martha has 3 children and a husband who works on the riverboats. Space is limited." "You are allowed to be bitter," Isaac said. "Family should take care of family." "What about your family? Do you miss them?" He considered the question. "Sometimes, but I knew when I came west that I was making a choice. This life is not for everyone, and I did not expect them to follow me into it. Your situation is different. You were cast out, not choosing to leave." Catherine's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup. "Perhaps I was meant to leave. Perhaps this is where I am supposed to be. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that neither was quite ready to examine. Isaac cleared his throat. I need to ride out and find your wagon today. Can you describe where you left it? She did her best, explaining the landmarks she had passed, the direction she had been traveling. It was not much, but Isaac had spent enough time in this territory to make educated guesses. He left her with strict instructions to rest, water within easy reach, and Rufus for company. The search took most of the day. He found the wagon 3 hours northeast, one wheel completely shattered, the other three sunk deep into sand where Catherine had tried to drive through a wash that had looked more solid than it was. Her trunk sat in the back, along with a carpet bag and a few other personal items. Everything was intact, baked by the sun, but otherwise undamaged. Loading her belongings onto a pack horse he had brought for that purpose, Isaac examined the wagon more carefully. It was beyond repair out here and not worth the effort to drag back to the ranch. He unhitched the long-dead horse from the wagon, leading it back through the heat, reaching the ranch as the sun began its western descent. Catherine was sitting on the porch when he arrived, wearing his shirt like a dress, her own dress hanging on the line to dry. Her face lit up when she saw him, and that hollow feeling in his chest expanded. You found it, she said, standing carefully. She was still weak, but steadier than yesterday. Everything is here, your trunk, your bag. He unloaded the items onto the porch. The wagon is destroyed, but I did not figure you would need it again. No. She looked at the trunk with an expression he could not quite read. Everything I own is in there, my whole life packed into one box. That is more than some folks have. She looked at him then, really looked at him and smiled. You are relentlessly practical, are not you? Someone has to be. That evening they ate dinner together at the small table, and Catherine told him stories about St. Louis, about the Mississippi River and the boats that traveled it, about theaters and restaurants and gas lights that turn night into day. Isaac listened, fascinated by this world he had never seen, painting his own pictures with her words. You make it sound beautiful, he said when she paused. It was in its way, but it was also crowded and dirty and loud. Here there is space, silence, room to breathe. She looked around his simple house with something that might have been appreciation. I think I could learn to love it here. Over the next 3 days, Catherine grew stronger. She insisted on helping with small tasks around the house, cooking meals and mending a shirt of his that had torn. Isaac found himself taking longer over chores that should have been quick, inventing reasons to come back to the house more frequently than necessary. They talked constantly, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Catherine spoke of her desire to be more than someone's dependent, to build something of her own. Isaac talked about his plans for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd, maybe build a better house someday. On the 4th morning, Isaac woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. He found Catherine in the kitchen, fully dressed in her own clothes, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up when he entered, her smile warm but tinged with something that looked like sadness. I thought I should make breakfast as a thank you, she said, for everything you have done. You did not need to do that. I wanted to. She plated the food, and they sat down to eat. Isaac, I have been thinking. I should get to Bismarck. My uncle is probably worried. He had known this was coming, had been preparing himself for it, but the words still hit him like a physical blow. Of course, I can take you this afternoon if you are feeling up to the ride. I am. They ate in silence after that, the easy conversation of the past days replaced by an awkward awareness that something was ending before it had really begun. Isaac told himself he was being ridiculous. He barely knew this woman. 4 days was nothing. The connection he felt was probably one-sided anyway, a product of circumstance rather than genuine compatibility. But when he looked up and saw the tears she was trying to hide, he knew he was lying to himself. The ride to Bismarck took 2 hours. Catherine sat in front of Isaac on Daisy, the same position they had been in when he brought her to the ranch, But everything felt different now. Her trunk and bag were secured behind them, and with every step the horse took, Isaac felt something precious slipping away. Bismarck was growing, had been growing steadily since the Northern Pacific Railway had reached it in 1873. The streets were a mix of established businesses and new construction, wagons and horses, and people creating organized chaos. Isaac directed Daisy to the general store, a solid building near the center of town with fresh paint and large windows. A man emerged as they dismounted, middle-aged and balding, his face creased with worry that transformed to relief when he saw Catherine. Catherine! Thank God! Your mother sent a telegram saying when you should arrive, and when you did not come, I feared the worst. He hurried forward, helping her down from the horse. What happened? Are you all right? I am fine, Uncle Joseph. My wagon broke down, and I got lost trying to find help. Mr. Sullivan found me and saved my life. Joseph Osborne turned to Isaac, extending his hand. I am in your debt, sir. Please let me pay you for your trouble. Isaac shook his hand but shook his head at the offer of money. No payment necessary. I did what anyone would do. Nevertheless, you have my deepest gratitude. Joseph turned back to Catherine, his arm around her shoulders in a protective gesture. Come inside, dear. You must be exhausted. I have a room prepared for you upstairs. Catherine looked back at Isaac, her eyes speaking volumes that her mouth could not say in front of her uncle. Thank you, Isaac, for everything. You are welcome. The words felt inadequate. But what else could he say? That he did not want her to go? That the past 4 days had been the best of his life? That he was already dreading the return to his empty house? He unloaded her trunk and bag, carrying them into the store at Joseph's direction. The interior was well stocked and organized, shelves lined with everything from tools to fabric to foodstuffs. A good business, clearly successful. Catherine would be well cared for here. With nothing left to do, Isaac tipped his hat to them both and turned to leave. He was at the door when Catherine called out, Isaac, wait. He turned. She had crossed the room quickly, standing close enough that he could see the green flecks in her eyes. Will you come back? She asked quietly. To visit? Bismarck is only 5 miles from my ranch. I come to town for supplies regularly. That is not what I meant. His heart was beating too fast. I know. Then will you come back to visit? Yes. The smile she gave him was worth more than gold. Good. Joseph was watching them with interest, but he said nothing as Isaac finally left. The ride back to the ranch felt 3 times as long as the ride to town. The house was exactly as he had left it, but it felt different now. Emptier. He could see Catherine everywhere, in the kitchen where she had cooked, on the porch where she had sat in his shirt, in his bedroom where she had recovered her strength. Rufus whined, sensing his mood, and Isaac scratched the dog's ears absently. I know, boy, I miss her too. 2 days passed. Isaac tried to focus on work, but his mind kept wandering. He told himself he needed to give her time to settle in with her uncle, to adjust to her new life. He definitely should not ride into town immediately, like some lovesick fool. On the 3rd day, he rode into town. The general store was busy when he arrived, 3 customers being helped by Joseph, while Catherine measured out flour for an elderly woman. She looked up when the bell above the door chimed, and her face lit up when she saw him. Mr. Sullivan, she said, her tone formal but her eyes warm. What can I help you with today? I need... He scrambled for something, anything that would justify his presence. Nails, and maybe some coffee. Of course. She finished with her current customer, then led him to the appropriate shelves. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I did not think you would come so soon. I said I would come. I know, but I thought you meant in a week or 2, not 3 days. Would you prefer I had waited? No. She picked up a box of nails, pretending to examine them. Are you busy this Sunday? Not particularly. There is a church social after services. People bring food, and there is music and dancing. Would you like to come? I am not much for dancing. Neither am I. But we could sit and talk, away from the store and my uncle's curious looks. Isaac took the nails from her, their fingers brushing in the exchange. I will be there. Sunday arrived with clear skies and moderate temperatures, a perfect day for a social gathering. Isaac put on his best shirt, the one without any patches or stains, and rode to town feeling absurdly nervous. He had faced down stampeding cattle, ridden out blizzards, even stared down a mountain lion once. None of that had made his hands shake the way they were shaking now. The church was a simple white building with a steeple surrounded by tables set up under shade trees. Women were laying out food, men were tuning instruments, children were running in wild packs, and the air was filled with conversation and laughter. Isaac felt out of place immediately. He was not a social man, preferred his own company or that of his animals to crowds. Then he saw Catherine wearing a dress of pale yellow, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, and nothing else mattered. She saw him at the same moment, excusing herself from the group of women she had been talking with and making her way over to him. You came. I said I would. Come meet some people. Everyone is very friendly. She was not wrong. The people of Bismarck welcomed him with warmth, asking about his ranch and sharing their own stories. Joseph Osborne introduced him to several potential business contacts, men who might buy cattle or sell supplies at good rates. The food was excellent, the music lively, and Isaac found himself actually enjoying the afternoon. But the best part was sitting under a cottonwood tree with Catherine, watching the festivities from a slight distance, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about working in the store, about learning the inventory, and meeting the customers. He told her about a calf that had been born earlier in the week, about Rufus catching a rabbit and being absurdly proud of himself. As the sun began to set, someone started a slower tune on the fiddle, and couples moved into an open space to dance. Catherine looked at them wistfully. I thought you said you did not dance, Isaac said. I said I was not much for dancing. That is different from not wanting to. He stood, extending his hand. Then we should probably do something about that. Her eyes widened. I thought you did not dance either. I am not much for dancing, but I am willing to make an exception. They moved to join the other couples, and Isaac took her in his arms, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. They swayed more than danced, neither of them particularly skilled, but it did not matter. Nothing mattered except the feel of her hand in his, the way she looked at him like he was someone worth looking at. Isaac, she said softly. What are we doing? Dancing, apparently. That is not what I mean. He knew what she meant. He had been asking himself the same question for days. I do not know, but I know I could not stay away from you. I tried for 2 whole days to convince myself that what I felt was just circumstance or loneliness or anything other than what it actually was. What is it actually? I think I am falling in love with you, Catherine Osborne. I know that is foolish, given that we have known each other barely a week. I know you have your own life to build and your own plans to make. But I needed to tell you the truth. She stopped moving, standing still in the middle of the makeshift dance floor. Other couples swirled around them, but they might as well have been alone. Tears shimmered in her eyes, catching the last light of the setting sun. It is not foolish, she whispered. I feel it too. I thought I was going mad, feeling this way so quickly. But from the moment I opened my eyes and saw you there beside that well, I knew you were different, special. I just did not expect special to turn into this. Isaac cupped her face in his hands, mindful of the public setting, of her uncle watching from across the yard, of propriety and reputation. What do we do about it? We could court, properly. Give it time. See if what we feel now lasts. It will last. You sound very certain. I am, are you not? She smiled, leaning into his touch. Yes, I am. They did court properly over the following months. Isaac came to town every Sunday, attending church services and the social gatherings that followed. He took Catherine on picnics, on rides through the countryside, on walks along the Missouri River. They talked about everything, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Joseph Osborne approved, which helped. He was a kind man, genuinely concerned for Catherine's well being, and he could see that Isaac treated her with respect and care. He invited Isaac to Sunday dinners, asked his advice on various matters, and slowly began to feel less like Catherine's guardian and more like a friend. As summer turned to autumn, the leaves on the cottonwoods turning gold and the air taking on a crisp edge, Isaac knew he could not wait any longer. He loved Catherine with a certainty that had only grown stronger with time. The question was not whether to ask her to marry him, but when and how. He decided on a Sunday in late October, the last truly beautiful day before winter would settle in for its long stay. He convinced Catherine to ride out to his ranch, ostensibly to see the improvements he had been making. Joseph agreed to the trip with only a slightly knowing smile. The ranch did look better. Isaac had fixed the porch, painted the house, built a new chicken coop, but these were not the real reason he had brought her here. They stood on the porch, looking out at the land that rolled away in every direction, empty and vast and full of possibility. Catherine leaned against the railing, the wind catching her hair. "It really is beautiful here," she said. "Lonely, but beautiful." "It does not have to be lonely." Isaac's mouth was dry, his heart racing. "It could be a home, a real home with a family." She turned to look at him, and he saw understanding dawn in her eyes. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the ring he had bought from a jeweler in Bismarck 2 weeks ago. It was simple, a gold band with a small ruby, all he could afford, but Catherine gasped, as though he had presented her with a crown jewel. "Catherine Osborne, I know we have not known each other long. By some standards, this is foolish and rushed, but I also know that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I know that my life is better with you in it, that my house feels like a home when you are here. I know that I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling, that beautiful smile that had first caught his heart. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with a passion that took his breath away. They had kissed before, chaste touches of lips that acknowledged their feelings while respecting propriety. This was different. This was a promise, a commitment, a future unfurling before them like a banner in the wind. They were married 3 weeks later, on a Sunday in November, in the same white church where they had danced. Catherine wore a dress of cream silk that Joseph had ordered specially from Chicago. Isaac wore a new suit that felt stiff and uncomfortable, but the discomfort was worth it to see the look on Catherine's face as he met her at the altar. The ceremony was simple, the gathering small, just close friends and Joseph. They spoke their vows with voices steady and sure, and when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed his bride with a joy so profound it felt like his chest might burst. The wedding breakfast was held at the hotel, a small celebration with good food and better company. As the afternoon waned, Isaac and Catherine made their goodbyes, climbing into Isaac's wagon for the ride to the ranch. Their ranch now, their home. That first night, as husband and wife, they lay in bed together. Catherine's head on Isaac's chest, his arm around her shoulders. The house was quiet except for the wind outside and the occasional creak of settling wood. "Are you happy?" Isaac asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "I am happier than I ever thought possible." She tilted her head up to look at him. "When my wagon broke down, when I was walking through that desert, convinced I was going to die, I never imagined this. I never imagined you." "I am glad your wagon broke down." She laughed. "Only you would say something like that. It is true, if it had not, you would have made it to Bismarck, and I never would have met you. Someone else would have caught your attention, some shopkeeper or banker or railroad man, and I would still be alone." "No one else could have caught my attention. It was always going to be you, Isaac. Somehow, some way, we were meant to find each other. He kissed the top of her head. I found you collapsed beside a dried up well, and you shared your canteen and waited. You waited for me to wake up, to get better, to come back to you. You are very good at waiting. I would wait forever for you. You will not have to. I am here, and I am not going anywhere. Winter came early that year, snow falling in thick sheets that turned the world white. But inside their home, Catherine and Isaac were warm. They settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Catherine took to ranch life with determination, learning to milk cows, gather eggs, even help with the horses. Isaac taught her with patience, marveling at her willingness to try things that must have been completely foreign to her city upbringing. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Catherine reading aloud from books, while Isaac worked on leather repairs or whittled. They talked about their plans for the spring, about expanding the herd, maybe planting a larger vegetable garden. Simple dreams, but they were theirs together. Joseph visited when the weather allowed, bringing supplies and news from town. He was clearly pleased with Catherine's happiness, often remarking on how well marriage suited her. Isaac began to think of him as the father he had left behind in Pennsylvania, a connection he had not realized he missed until it was replaced. Spring arrived with the usual fanfare of mud and new grass and baby animals. 2 calves were born, triplet piglets, and what seemed like dozens of chicks. Catherine threw herself into the chaos with enthusiasm, bottle feeding a calf whose mother rejected it, tending to the garden with fierce determination. One morning in late May, Isaac woke to find Catherine leaning over the side of the bed, retching into a basin. He was beside her in an instant, holding her hair back, his free hand rubbing gentle circles on her back. Are you all right? Is it something you ate? She shook her head, wiping her mouth with a cloth. I do not think so. Should I ride for the doctor? No. She looked up at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. I think I am with child. The world seemed to stop. Isaac stared at her, his mind racing to catch up with her words. A baby. They were going to have a baby. Are you certain? Not completely, but I have missed my courses, and I have been feeling ill every morning for the past week. I wanted to be more sure before I said anything, but hiding it from you seemed dishonest. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, his face buried in her hair. A baby. We are going to have a baby. She laughed, the sound muffled against his chest. You are happy. Happy does not begin to cover it. The doctor confirmed it 2 weeks later. Catherine was indeed pregnant, due sometime in January. They shared the news with Joseph, who was delighted at the prospect of becoming a great uncle. Word spread through Bismarck, as news always did in small towns, and suddenly Catherine found herself the recipient of advice from every woman who had ever borne a child. The pregnancy progressed well. Catherine bloomed, her skin glowing, her energy seemingly boundless despite the occasional morning sickness. Isaac watched her with a mixture of awe and terror. He was going to be a father. The responsibility felt enormous, overwhelming, but when he looked at Catherine, at the way her hand would unconsciously rest on her growing belly, the fear transformed into determination. He would be a good father. He would give his child everything he had to give. As autumn painted the land in shades of amber and rust, Isaac worked to prepare the house for winter and for the baby. He built a cradle from oak, sanding it until the wood was smooth as glass, carving simple designs into the headboard. Catherine sewed blankets and tiny clothes, her needle flying as she created a wardrobe for someone they had not yet met. Winter arrived with snow and cold, and Catherine grew larger, moving with the careful deliberation of someone carrying precious cargo. Isaac found himself watching her constantly, ready to help at a moment's notice, driving her to exasperation with his hovering. I am pregnant, not made of glass, she said one evening in late December, when he had jumped up to help her from her chair for the 3rd time. I know that. I just want to help. You can help by sitting down and relaxing. You are making me nervous. He sat, but relaxing was impossible. The baby was due any day now, and every twinge Catherine felt sent his heart racing. The labor began on a Wednesday, in the second week of January, early in the morning when the world was still dark. Catherine woke Isaac with a hand on his shoulder and a calm statement that it was time. He was out of bed instantly, scrambling into his clothes, racing to saddle a horse to fetch the midwife from Bismarck. By the time he returned with the midwife, an efficient woman named Mrs. Porter, the contractions were coming regularly. Mrs. Porter shooed Isaac out of the bedroom, telling him to boil water and find clean linens and generally stay out of the way. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Isaac paced the main room, listening to Catherine's cries from behind the closed door, feeling utterly helpless. This was the hardest thing he had ever done, this waiting, this inability to do anything useful. He prayed more than he had prayed in years, making bargains with God, promising anything if Catherine and the baby would just be all right. As the sun set, painting the snow outside in shades of pink and orange, a new sound joined Catherine's cries, a baby's wail, strong and healthy and perfect. Isaac was across the room and through the door before he could think, stopping short when he saw Catherine propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted, holding a small bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. "It is a boy," Mrs. Porter said, smiling. "A healthy boy with good lungs." Isaac approached the bed slowly, hardly daring to breathe. Catherine looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and joy. "Come meet your son," she said softly. He sat on the edge of the bed, and she placed the baby in his arms. The weight was so slight, the body so small, and yet Isaac had never held anything so important. He looked down at the tiny face, the closed eyes, the miniature fingers that wrapped reflexively around his thumb, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered. "You are perfect, thank you. Thank you for this." "We made him together." Catherine reached up to touch his face. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names, of course, but had not settled on anything definite. Looking at his son now, Isaac knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas, after your father." Catherine's breath caught, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Are you certain?" "I am certain, Thomas Sullivan. It is a good, strong name." "Thomas Sullivan," Catherine repeated, smiling through her tears. "Yes, it is perfect." Mrs. Porter stayed for 3 days, helping Catherine recover and teaching them both the intricacies of caring for an infant. By the time she left, Catherine was moving around with more ease, and Isaac had mastered the art of changing diapers without getting soaked. Thomas was a good baby, sleeping well at night after those first chaotic weeks, eating with enthusiasm, growing so fast Isaac swore he could see changes daily. The house that had once seemed so quiet now rang with baby sounds, and Isaac discovered he did not miss the quiet at all. Spring came again, bringing with it Thomas's first smile, his first laugh, the first time he rolled over on his own. Catherine and Isaac marveled at each development, discussing their son's progress with the same seriousness other people might discuss world events. Joseph visited frequently, utterly besotted with his great-nephew. He brought gifts from town, toys and clothes, and once an elaborate rocking horse that Thomas was far too young to use, but that delighted Isaac nonetheless. "You two have built something beautiful here," Joseph said one Sunday afternoon, watching Catherine and Isaac play with Thomas on a blanket spread under the cottonwood tree. "Not just a ranch or a home, but a real family. Your father would be proud, Catherine." "I hope so," Catherine said, bouncing Thomas gently on her knee. "I wish he could have met him. He can see him wherever he is." "I am certain of it." As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch grew as well. Isaac's careful management and shrewd business sense paid off. The herd expanded, the profits increased, and they were able to make improvements they had only dreamed of before. A larger barn, better fencing, even a hired hand to help with the increased workload. Catherine threw herself into ranch life with the same determination she brought to everything. She kept meticulous accounts, managed the household with efficiency, and still found time to play with Thomas and plan meals and make their house a home. On their fifth wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Catherine with plans for a new, larger house. The original structure had served them well, but with Thomas running around and the possibility of more children on the horizon, they needed more space. "Are you certain we can afford this?" Catherine asked, looking at the sketches Isaac had drawn. "We can afford it. Business has been good and I have been saving. Besides, I want you to have a house worthy of you. Something with a real parlor, a separate kitchen, bedrooms for all the children we are going to have." She smiled at that, wrapping her arms around his waist. "All the children? How many are you planning?" "As many as you are willing to give me." "That is a dangerous promise to let me make." "I am willing to take the risk." The house was completed by the following spring. A beautiful two-story structure with a wrap-around porch and large windows that let in the light. Catherine cried when she saw it finished, walking through the empty rooms with wonder, already planning where furniture would go, what colors to paint, which rooms. They moved in on a Saturday, with help from several men from town. The old house became storage for tools and equipment. The new house became the heart of their growing family. Because Catherine had been right about one thing, she was pregnant again. Their second son, Jonathan, was born in the new house in September, an easier birth than Thomas had been, but no less miraculous. Two boys now, two loud, energetic, wonderful boys who filled their days with chaos and love. Years passed, marked by birthdays and Christmases, by spring plantings and fall harvests. Thomas started school in Bismarck, riding into town each day with Isaac when he went to deliver goods or pick up supplies. Jonathan followed 3 years later, equally bright and twice as mischievous as his older brother. Catherine and Isaac settled into the comfortable rhythm of long marriage. They still talked every evening, sharing their days and their thoughts. They still laughed together, still found ways to steal moments alone despite the demands of children and ranch. The passion of their early days had not faded, but had transformed into something deeper, richer, more complex. When Thomas was 12 and Jonathan 9, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the others, leaving her exhausted and sick more often than not. Isaac worried, hovering worse than he had with Thomas, until Catherine finally told him firmly that he needed to trust her body to do what it had done twice before. The baby arrived in March during a late-season snowstorm that nearly prevented the doctor from reaching them in time. But he made it, and so did Catherine. And when Isaac finally held his daughter, he understood what people meant when they talked about being wrapped around someone's finger. "Elizabeth," Catherine said, watching Isaac cradle their daughter with awe. "We should name her Elizabeth. After your mother?" "After my mother. She may not have been perfect, but she did her best, and I want our daughter to carry that legacy forward, to be strong and capable and determined." Elizabeth was all those things and more. She was also spoiled utterly by her father and two older brothers, a princess in their small kingdom. She was smart, fearless, and completely unafraid to go after what she wanted. As the children grew, so did the ranch. Isaac bought more land, expanded the operations, hired more help. The Sullivan Ranch became known throughout North Dakota as a reliable source of quality cattle, and Isaac's reputation as a fair employer and honest businessman spread. Catherine found her own outlets for her energy and intelligence. She started a small school for the children of ranch hands and nearby families, teaching reading and arithmetic in the parlor of their house 2 days a week. She also became involved in various town committees, working to improve roads and establish a proper library. Through it all, through the busy days and exhausted nights, through the struggles and the triumphs, Catherine and Isaac remained each other's touchstone. They would sit on the porch after the children were in bed, holding hands, watching the stars, and marvel at how far they had come from that day beside the dried-up well. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not found me?" Catherine asked one such night when they were both in their 50s, their children grown and starting families of their own. Never, Isaac said, because you were always meant to be here. We were always meant to find each other. Even if it took a broken wagon and a dried up well, even then, especially then, he squeezed her hand. Every choice I made brought me to that place at that moment, and every choice you made brought you there too. It was not chance, Catherine. It was destiny. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I used to think destiny was something that happened to other people in stories. I did not believe it could be real. What changed your mind? You, us, this life we built. How could it be anything but destiny when it feels so right? They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over the land they had worked so hard to build into something meaningful. In the distance, they could see lights from the small house Thomas had built for his own growing family. Jonathan lived in Bismarck, running the general store with his great-uncle Joseph, who was now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack. Elizabeth had married a lawyer and moved to Fargo, but she visited often with her husband and their infant son. The ranch would pass to Thomas when Isaac and Catherine were gone, had already been legally arranged. But that felt far in the future, a distant concern. Right now, in this moment, they were content with what they had built, with the family they had created, with the love that had sustained them through decades. I love you, Catherine Sullivan, Isaac said, the same words he had spoken countless times over their marriage. I love you too, Isaac Sullivan, she replied, the same response she always gave, and yet it never felt stale or repetitive. It was simply truth, constant and unchanging. More years passed. Joseph died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, and Catherine grieved for the uncle who had given her a home when she needed one most. Thomas took over full management of the ranch, and Isaac found himself in the unexpected role of grandfather, offering advice rather than orders. It was an adjustment, but not an unwelcome one. Catherine's health began to decline in her late 60s, her energy not what it once was. She had to give up her school, much to her disappointment, but she found new purpose in helping with her grandchildren and writing letters to Elizabeth, long detailed accounts of daily life that her daughter treasured. Isaac's body began to show the wear of decades of hard labor. His joints ached in cold weather, his back protested more than it used to. But he still rose early every morning, still checked on the animals, still sat with Catherine every evening to watch the sunset. They were sitting on the porch on a Tuesday in late August, the air warm and thick with the promise of autumn, when Catherine suddenly gripped Isaac's hand tightly. "What is it?" he asked, immediately alert. "Are you in pain?" "No pain." She smiled at him, and in that smile he saw the young woman she had been, collapsed beside a well, looking up at him with sage green eyes. "I was just thinking about how grateful I am. For you, for our life, for everything we have experienced together. I want to make sure you know that. I know, and I feel the same way." "Good." She settled back in her chair, her hand still in his. "Promise me something, Isaac. Anything. When I am gone, and I will go first because women always do in these stories, promise me you will not spend your remaining time mourning. Live. Spend time with the children and grandchildren. Enjoy what we built together. I will be waiting for you whenever you are ready to join me, but until then, live fully. Catherine, promise me." He could not speak around the lump in his throat, so he simply nodded. She squeezed his hand, satisfied, and they sat together as the sun painted the sky in impossible colors. Catherine died 3 years later, in her sleep, peacefully and without pain. Isaac woke to find her still and cold beside him, her face serene, one hand resting over her heart. He sat with her for a long time, holding her hand, saying goodbye to the woman who had been his partner, his love, his everything for over 40 years. The funeral was large, attended by people from all over the region. Catherine had touched many lives with her kindness and intelligence and determination. Isaac stood beside her grave, flanked by his children and grandchildren, and tried to honor her final request by celebrating what they had shared rather than drowning in what he had lost. It was hard. The house felt empty without her, too quiet, too still. Isaac found himself talking to her anyway, sharing his day as though she were sitting in her chair by the fireplace. Thomas worried about him, visiting more frequently, but Isaac assured him he was fine. And he was, in a way. He missed Catherine with an ache that never fully went away, but he also felt her presence constantly, in the house they had built, in the family they had created, in the land they had tended together. He spent time with his grandchildren, teaching them to ride and rope and respect the animals they raised. He attended church socials and town meetings, staying connected to the community Catherine had loved. 3 years after Catherine's death, on a cold morning in November, Isaac woke feeling different. Not sick exactly, but aware that something had changed. He rose slowly, dressed carefully, and went outside to watch the sunrise. The land stretched before him, brown with winter sleep, beautiful in its stark simplicity. He thought about the day he had found Catherine beside the dried-up well, thought about the choice he had made to stop, to help, to wait. That choice had given him everything that mattered: a wife he cherished, children who made him proud, a legacy that would continue long after he was gone. "I am ready now," he said aloud, to Catherine, to God, to the universe. "If you are ready for me." Thomas found him that afternoon, sitting in his chair on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, his face peaceful. He had simply gone to sleep and not woken up, the doctor said later. His heart had just stopped, worn out from a life well lived. They buried Isaac beside Catherine, under a cottonwood tree on a hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone was simple, listing their names and dates, and a single line that Thomas insisted on adding: "Two souls, one destiny." The ranch continued, passed down through generations. The story of how Isaac and Catherine met became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The dried-up Henderson well became a landmark, a place where something miraculous had begun. Because that was what it was, in the end. A miracle. Not the dramatic kind found in religious texts, but the quiet, everyday miracle of two people finding each other against all odds, of love growing in the harshest soil, of a family tree taking root in unlikely ground. The cowboy had found her collapsed beside a dried-up well. He had shared his canteen and waited. And in that waiting, in that simple act of human kindness, he had found not just a woman to save, but a life to live, a love to cherish, a legacy to leave. Years later, when Elizabeth was an old woman herself, she would take her own grandchildren to visit the ranch, now a historical landmark preserved by the state. She would show them the house, the barn, the cottonwood tree where her grandparents were buried, and she would tell them the story, making sure they understood that true love was not just about grand gestures and dramatic moments. "Your great-great-grandfather could have ridden past that well," she would say. "He was busy, he had work to do, he had his own concerns, but he stopped, he helped, he waited. And because of that choice, all of us exist. Every person in our family, every happiness we have experienced, every dream we have chased, it all started because one man chose to be kind. Remember that. Remember that the smallest choices can change everything, that love often begins in the most unlikely places, that patience and compassion are never wasted." And the children would listen, would look at the old photographs of Isaac and Catherine, young and strong, and so clearly in love, and they would understand that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They were the legacy of two people who had found each other in the wilderness, who had built a life from nothing, who had loved each other with a devotion that transcended time and death. The dried-up well still stood, though it was fenced off now for safety. But people still came to see it, to stand where Catherine had collapsed and Isaac had found her, to imagine that moment when two lives intersected and changed forever. Because some places hold magic, not in the supernatural sense, but in the human sense. Some places mark the beginning of stories that echo through generations. Some places remind us that we are all just one choice away from a completely different life. That destiny and chance dance together in ways we can never fully understand. That love can grow anywhere if given the chance. The sun still rose over that land every morning, still painted the sky in impossible colors every evening. The seasons still cycled through their eternal dance. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Isaac and Catherine Sullivan were together, still holding hands, still watching over the family they had created, still grateful for the day a cowboy found a woman collapsed beside a dried up well, shared his canteen, and waited. The end was really just a beginning that had already happened, a story that continued in every child born to their line, in every act of kindness inspired by their example, in every person who heard their story and decided to stop, to help, to wait for someone who needed them. Thomas Sullivan, great great grandson of the original Thomas, stood at the historical marker that had been erected beside the old well. He was young, just 23, recently graduated from college and uncertain about his future. He had grown up hearing the stories, had always felt the weight of living up to such a legacy. "What would you have done?" he asked the wind, asking his ancestors, asking himself. How did you know she was worth waiting for? How did you know it would all work out? The wind did not answer, of course, but as Thomas stood there, hand resting on the warm stone of the marker, he felt something settle inside him. They had not known. Isaac could not have known that the woman he found would become his wife, his partner, the mother of his children. He had simply made a choice to help, to stay, to see what happened next. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not that love was destined or fated, but that it required choice, courage, commitment. Isaac had chosen to stop at the well. He had chosen to share his water. He had chosen to wait. And then he had chosen, day after day for more than 40 years, to love Catherine, to build a life with her, to honor the partnership they had created. Thomas looked out at the land his ancestors had worked, at the ranch that still bore the Sullivan name, at the town of Bismarck in the distance where his great-great-great-uncle Joseph had once run a general store. He thought about the choices ahead of him, about the uncertain future, about all the things he did not know. Then he smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. He did not need to know everything. He just needed to be willing to stop, to help, to wait for what came next. The rest would unfold in its own time. As he walked back to his car, a young woman was struggling with a flat tire on the side of the road. Thomas slowed, then stopped, getting out to offer help. She looked up at him with grateful eyes, thanking him profusely as he changed the tire with practiced efficiency. "I am Thomas," he said when the job was done. "Clara," she replied, smiling. "Thank you so much for stopping. Most people just drove right past. My great-great-grandfather taught me to always stop when someone needs help. It is kind of a family tradition." They talked for a few more minutes, exchanged phone numbers, made plans to get coffee later that week. As Thomas drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing Clara still standing there, watching him leave. He did not know if this was the beginning of a story like Isaac and Catherine's. He did not know if Clara would become important to his life, but he had made a choice to stop, to help, to see what happened next. And that, he realized, was how all the best stories began. With a choice, with kindness, with someone willing to share what they had and wait to see what grew from such small seeds. The sun was setting as Thomas drove back toward Bismarck, painting the North Dakota sky in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in that vast expanse, two souls who had loved each other across decades watched their legacy continue, watched their story echo forward through time, and were content. Because love was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up day after day, choice after choice, building something lasting from the most ordinary materials. It was about finding someone collapsed beside a dried up well and deciding they were worth the water, worth the wait, worth everything you had to give. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, they would give you everything back and more besides. They would give you a life worth living, a love worth having, a legacy worth leaving. The story that began beside a dried up well in the summer of 1883 continued, would always continue, as long as there were people willing to stop, to help, to wait for love to find them in the most unlikely places.